Hi, this is Chris Collenette, Chairperson of the Ireland-Canada Business Association, the representative voice of over 100 companies doing business between the two countries. We're here today with Tom O'Brien, the Managing Director of Nephin Energy, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Canadian Pension Plan, the CPP. Hi Tom, how are you today?
Good, Chris. Thank you for having me today. It's a great opportunity to talk to you.
You're very welcome. Tell me a little bit about Nephin, the decision to set up here in Ireland, and the key assets that you're managing here for the CPP.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nephin Energy is actually a relatively new company. We, with the support of our sponsor, the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board, we acquired Shell's interest in the Carb gas field in 2018, which makes Nephin Energy Ireland's largest domestic producer of natural gas. In terms of why Carb and why Ireland, I suppose a few different reasons. Carb is a world-class asset. When we acquired it from Shell, it was one of Shell's best performing assets globally, and that's sort of testament to the quality of the people that work there, their commitment and professionalism, and thankfully they moved across with the asset when Vermilion took over operatorship from Shell. I guess another reason was that connection, that Canadian connection with Vermilion as a Canadian listed oil and gas company.
And just to explain it, Vermilion operates the gas fields right now, which is another Canadian company based in Alberta.
That's right, and they have offices across the road here in Bridge, and they're operating now the asset instead of Shell. They took over from Shell, and we've been delighted with the way the asset has performed since they took over. And I guess another reason was CPPIB is a global pension investment fund. They look at things globally. They spend a lot of time thinking about the sort of countries they invest in, and I think Ireland ticked the box in a number of different respects. English speaking, common law jurisdiction, in some respects a shared heritage with our connection with Britain. So,
and now it looks like the last English speaking jurisdiction in Europe.
That's right, or as I saw a poster once, welcome to the largest English speaking city.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's it. So no, that's it. I mean, and we're delighted with the acquisition. The asset's been performing very well since Vermilion took over. We're also, proud of the contribution that Carb makes locally in terms of the hundreds of people that have been employed over the years through its development, and are employed there now. Millions of euro has gone into the local infrastructure in terms of the roads, the broadband network, and all the benefits, the indirect benefits that businesses in the Irish Peninsula derive from Carb is important too. But on a national level, very proud too of what Carb does. It produces up to 50% of the country's daily gas requirement.
And the remaining 50%, is that imported?
Imported, yeah, okay. From the UK. That's okay. Right. So
could the Corb field supply the entire amount?
Well, if we would have to identify some additional reserves, but that's, there's things we're looking at there in the area around Carb potentially. That's part of the future, hopefully. So yeah, no, it's a great asset, and we're really proud to own it. And
so I know before Christmas the government in Ireland made some pronouncements with regards to energy and energy policy over the next number of years. What's your view on the government's new policies?
Yeah, so look, I suppose you have to look at the context first. I think there's an old Chinese proverb that says, may you live in interesting times, and there's no doubt that we are for a whole host of different reasons, but particularly the oil and gas industry is probably the most interesting or challenging time since the advent of the industry 150 years ago. And there's no doubt that when we look at an energy mix, any energy mix needs to provide affordable, reliable and sustainable energy. And it's probably fair to say over the last number of decades, the oil and gas industry has done a good job of providing affordable and reliable energy, but it's not really matching that third fundamental requirement about being sustainable. Economies and countries have been able to develop on the back of the affordable, reliable energy that oil and gas has provided them, but we can't really hold our hand up and say now we can maintain human prosperity and environmental protection at the same time. That doesn't work. So something's got to change. So there is you're right, there's a very active and passionate debate going on right now globally as to how we respond to the challenge of climate change. And that's no less the case here in Ireland. So that's the context of why the government is sort of, looking at its position vis-a-vis the industry. I think, what the government has said in their policy paper before Christmas was that there won't be any new oil exploration licenses. Existing licenses are fine. I'm glad to say that the government has also accepted the fact that natural gas is going to play a critical role in Ireland's energy mix for the foreseeable future. I mean, if you look at any of the figures, the Academy of Irish Engineers still established that by within 10 years from now, gas is still going to have to probably be relied on to provide 90% of our electricity when the wind isn't blowing. I know EirGrid are estimating that our electricity demand will go up by 57% over that same 10-year period. So gas is going to remain important for the foreseeable future. So I think we have to work with government. I think government needs to look at this through a lens of energy security. I think is critically important. We are, as you mentioned it earlier, we rely on the balance of our gas across one interconnector from the UK. I think sometimes in the debate, the value of domestic gas production is sort of forgotten.
And especially given that the UK have been part of Europe for the last 40 years. So what happens there? I mean, is there a chance that gas supply, there could be tariffs put on access to that gas supply?
Anything's possible. So I think there's three things to consider, I suppose, when you look at the importance of domestic gas production. The first is, locking ourselves into a future where we're 100% reliant on others for something as fundamentally important as natural gas, I would advocate isn't a smart idea. For a few different reasons. The first is, it's no better for the climate. If you have to transport your gas across thousands of kilometers or ship it from the Middle East, it's worse for the climate. There's more climate emissions. There's estimates that it's 30% or more worse. So there isn't a climate argument for that. And then you look at the exchequer situation. SEAI have figures that we're spending around €4 billion a year on energy imports. And that figure was higher before CARB came online, and it's set to increase again as CARB declines over the years. So there's an exchequer impact here as well. And the third thing is energy security. We are reliant now on the UK and post-Brexit UK across one single interconnector for the balance of our gas requirement. And so if people to ask me, what would I like to see, or, I think we need to have a conversation in this country that's, grounded in sort of realities and certain facts. Reality number one, that we are a country on the very edge of Europe, a small island on the edge of Europe that's, heavily reliant on energy imports. So let's look at our energy security policy. Might we say to ourselves, let's target a certain percentage of our energy mix from domestic production, if at all possible. So at least that way we're not as reliant on others for our energy. I think the second thing that would be helpful is, there's no doubt that investor confidence offshore industry right now is fairly low over the last 12 to 18 months because of what's happening there. And I think if government is serious about the importance of natural gas, I think it's important that we have companies in the offshore industry that are prepared to invest the millions to go and find this gas and develop this gas. And remember, it
results in employment for specialists coming into the country, but also opportunities for Irish people living here. Is there an idea of how many employees the gas and petroleum industry here in Ireland employ?
Well, we employ approximately 100 people just on the plant out in Belnaboy, which are valuable jobs out in the Erin's Peninsula. But that's
the West Coast.
Yeah, that's right. But then you have to think about all the indirect, the Killybegs Harbour, Donegal Airport, all the suppliers, all the contractors that benefit from.
And is that just Nephin, or is that Nephin with Vermilion as well?
That's the CARB joint venture.
Okay,
and then you look at what Kinsale gas field did for Cork many years ago. A whole pharmaceutical industry grew up around the fact that there was, like I said earlier, an affordable, reliable source of gas on their doorstep. So the knock-on or indirect benefits from this industry can be quite substantial. So can government look at energy policy, energy security? Can they do something to maybe help the investor confidence? And I suppose thirdly, if I was to ask them, one thing to consider is to have a look at the regulatory framework to make sure that the regulatory bodies are resourced appropriately. The projects that we undertake are high value, long-term, complex projects. And it's really important that you have a regulatory regime that's fit for purpose, so that your permitting regime is efficient. There isn't inefficiencies in there that will cause you undue delay and things like. I mean, regulatory oversight is essential for our industry because of what we do is a serious business. But making sure that regulatory regime is fit for purpose and properly resourced is an important thing too.
And I'm right in saying, and I mean, I'm a novice when it comes to the energy industry, but the carbon emissions, the result from gas, are less than the carbon emissions from oil.
Substantially so. It's one of the of the fossil fuels. I mean, it's substantially better than coal and peat.
Yeah.
Peat is probably the worst, then coal, then oil, and gas is somewhere below all of them. And so it is. People talk about it as the transition fuel. It's the fuel that we will need, for that base load that I was talking about earlier, to help enable this transition to a low carbon future. So, I'm excited about the future for energy in Ireland and Europe. Nephin Energy would like to invest in energy assets across the energy spectrum. I mean, I think that's the way the days of oil and gas companies just being oil and gas companies are coming to an end. I mean, just looking at our joint venture partners, Equinor, although there's a bit of a difference in scale between ourselves and Equinor, but Equinor would be one of the largest oil and gas producers in Europe.
And
but they also happen to be
Norway, is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
But they also happen to be one of the world's leading offshore wind developers. And that's probably the direction of travel now, that these large oil and gas companies will probably be at the vanguard of the renewable transition. So when I look at Ireland and I see a country that is looking to produce 70% of its electricity from renewable resources by 2030, when I look at the EU that's talking about being carbon neutral by 2050, that will take a lot of work and a huge amount of investment. And that's where I think CPPIB could play a really interesting role, because one of the leading pension funds, investment funds in the world, AAA rated, long-term patient capital. It's just the sort of capital that Ireland and Europe.
Having grown up and worked in Canada for a number of years, I hope to be a recipient of some CPP myself when I retire.
Well, I'm probably working on your behalf.
Oh, well,
Chris.
Thank you for all your hard work.
It's my pleasure. It's absolutely my pleasure. So no, I'm really excited about what Nephin can do with the support of CPPIB in Ireland and maybe further afield.
Great. Well, thanks for chatting with us today. I suppose if you to draw somewhat of a parallel with Canada, I can remember Prime Minister Trudeau asked after becoming Prime Minister, perhaps before, saying along the lines of the oil reserves in Alberta, no country in the world with this amount of natural reserves would not want to look at ways to get it to market, and it's about how you do it and how you do it in a balance with other sources of energy. And so in many respects there are these resources here in Ireland too. It would seem counterintuitive not to continue to exploit them to their benefit for the Irish Indigenous population, at least.
I think so. I think any sort of logical person would accept that we will need natural gas for some time to come. And then it becomes a question about whether you use domestic Irish gas or foreign imported gas from somewhere else. And for the reasons I set out earlier, I'd happen to believe that using Irish domestic gas is the way to go during this period in which we are reliant on it. There will be new technologies that come along that will free us from our reliance on fossil fuels, and that'll be fantastic. I hope Nephin Energy, and CPPIB will be invested in those too.
And there's other areas that CPPIB and Nephin are looking at investing in Ireland. Is that right?
Yeah, no, that's right. We're looking,
not just the traditional type of energy.
That's right. Yeah, so we're having a good look now at what might be, what are the investable opportunities in terms of onshore wind. Or offshore wind has a big future in Ireland. People talk about Ireland being the Saudi Arabia of offshore wind, because if you think about just look out the door, it's been quite windy. So
we're definitely the Saudi Arabia of rain.
That's right. Yeah, maybe they can harness rain.
Wind.
Yeah, harness rain. That's the future of energy.
Well, future water maybe.
Yeah.
Well, look, thank you very much for taking the time today and
No, Chris, my
welcoming
pleasure.
us here. And we look forward to further discussions in the future.
Thank you, Chris.